Okay, we've learned about connective steps, we've learned about subordinative steps. Now we're going to learn about adjectival steps. They are a little more complicated, but also a little more useful. First, we've got to figure out, what does adjectival mean? Adding an adjectival step to a base clause means you're adding a modifying phrase. That makes sense because adjectives modify nouns. So a modifying phrase cannot stand by itself as a sentence. It's not a dependent clause either because it's not a clause. Generally, they don't have subjects, and clauses must have a subject and a predicate. We call modifying phrases modifiers for short. So while there are many ways to add modifiers to a base clause, the three main methods of developing a sentence with modifiers are by beginning the phrase with a participle, an adjective, or a possessive pronoun. So let's go through each of those. A participle looks like a verb. In particular, it looks like an ing verb, but it acts like an adjective, which is why it would be an adjectival phrase. So Matt sat on the couch. There's your base clause, right? But with an ing participle, we can add the adjectival step. Matt sat on the couch reading his book. So reading his book would be the adjectival step. Now for the second one, the base clause would be the soup smelled delicious. But since you can add these adjectival steps anywhere, we can add it to the beginning of the sentence. Bubbling on the stove, the soup smelled delicious. So bubbling, there's your participle. And your adjectival step right there, you add it before the base clause. This one, the lead guitar player stood at the front of the stage, would be your base clause. Playing with the ing is your participle, adding your whole adjectival step. The lead guitar player stood at the front of the stage, playing a blistering solo. You can also add the adjectival step to the middle. The toy car, comma, rolling across the floor, comma, was going to break. There's your participle and your adjectival step added to the base clause in the middle. So that's how you use a participle to add an adjectival step. Next, we can use an adjective to add an adjectival step. So an adverb phrase can function as a modifying step. So this might seem tricky, but it's actually not. I'm saying we're adding an adjective, but this whole phrase is actually functioning as a kind of adverb. Because look at this. So here's your base clause here. Matt read on the couch. Simple base clause. Matt read on the couch, calm in the chaos of kids. So calm is an adjective, but this whole thing is describing how he read. He read calm in the chaos of kids. So, the next one. The soup bubbled on the stove. Fragrant and delicious. Fragrant and delicious, both adjectives. So here's your base clause, the soup bubbled on the stove, and then you use adjectives to describe, to add your adjectival step. The lead guitar player stood at the front of the stage, virtuosic as the music throbbed. So here's our base clause again. And here's our adjective. So we just add a comma and then an adjective to describe what's going on in the base clause. Same thing here. The toy car rolled across the floor, fragile, as the feet stomped around it. Fragile's your adjective. Use it to find an idea that extends the base clause, that develops the base clause, starting with an adjective. You can also use possessive pronouns to develop an adjectival step to go with a base clause. Possessive pronouns are like his, her, their, our. They're pronouns, but they're the possessive versions of the pronouns. So the first one, if you use a possessive pronoun as the first word of your adjectival step, that can help you develop the sentence. So Matt read on the couch. his legs covered by a blanket. So his obviously refers back to Matt, but it gives us a describing phrase to develop this base clause. Second one, the soup bubbled on the stove. There's our base clause again. Its aroma permeating the house. So it refers to the soup, obviously, and here's our adjectival step. Third, the lead guitar player stood in front of the stage, her fingers a blur on the fretboard. Possessive pronoun developing the base clause. And finally, the toy car rolled across the floor, its wheels spinning furiously. It's being a possessive pronoun developing the base clause, referring back to the toy car. So you can use these possessive pronouns as ways to begin an adjectival step. Now, a lot of these adjectival steps, especially the ones that start with participles, can be considered free modifiers. They are free because they can go in different places in the sentence. You can move them around. So for instance, if we have the base clause here, the cat trotted out to the woods, and we have this adjectival step, licking its lips, we can put that anywhere. Licking its lips, the cat trotted out to the woods. The cat trotted out to the woods, licking its lips. The cat, licking its lips, trotted out to the woods. It can go in the middle, it can go at the beginning, it can go at the end. That's why it's a free modifier. These are very useful because you can use them to vary up sentence structures. You don't have to have the same repetitive sentence structure all the time if you use free modifiers, because you can use them to bend sentences the way you want them to go. So let's do a little practice. I'll do one of each kind with these base clauses. So this first one I'll do a participle version. The base clause is the snow began to fall, making the roads increasingly dangerous. So making is the participle, the ing verb-looking thing that's actually functioning as an adjective. The next one I'll use an adjective. So the base clause is Kendall drove home. To that I'll add furious that her mother embarrassed her by calling her friends parents. So furious is our adjective. We're using that to describe how Kendall was when she drove home. She's driving home furious. And this last one, I'll use a possessive pronoun. Nellie elbowed the opposing player, her aggression earning her a yellow card. So her is our possessive pronoun, and I'm using that as sort of a jumping off point for the rest of the adjectival step. And those are examples of adjectival steps. Mindeman out.